Last NFL season, everybody saw the rise of the Detroit Lions offense. And even with an early season slump where the Lions offense only scored 6 points in back-to-back games against the Cowboys and Patriots, the Detroit Lions offense still finished in 5th with points per game. And this was also a Lions offense that scored more than 30 points in 8 of their 17 games and only had 3 games where they scored less than 20 points. So if we're looking at the NFL right now and we're trying to decide which team has the best offense going into the 2023 season, there's a small group of teams that are in the conversation. I would say it's between 7 teams: the 49ers, the Eagles, the Lions, the Chiefs, the Bengals, the Cowboys, and the Bills. With these 7 teams, obviously they all can't be the top offense in the NFL, and the first one to eliminate is pretty easy. It's the Cowboys. Get out of here, Cowgirls. You can't have the top offense with Dak Prescott. I'm sorry, it can't be done. I also want to note that you definitely could have made the argument to put Miami on this list of the top offenses, probably above Dallas, but I didn't put Miami on this list because they're definitely not one of the top 4 or 5 offenses. I think there's too many questions with their offensive line with left and right tackle. There's definitely way stronger running back rooms than Miami's, and if Tua takes one more bad hit, his NFL career could be done. So for those reasons, I wouldn't put Miami in like the top 5 or 6. But don't get me wrong, Miami still has a really strong offense, especially the wide receiver room with Waddle and Hill. The next team I would take off of this list, it's hard, but it'd have to be the Buffalo Bills. The offensive line is definitely a weak point for the Bills. It seemed like left tackle Dawkins was really the only solid lineman the Bills had last season. Buffalo's running back room was decent, but their run game was weak last season. Their wide receiver group seems pretty strong with Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, but they don't really have that solidified wide receiver 3. Additionally, Josh Allen struggled last season. Don't get me wrong, he's a phenomenal quarterback and extremely athletic, but we saw him make terrible interceptions in the red zone. And randomly, Josh Allen would just start playing hero ball in games and launch 3 incompletions 40 yards down the field, and the Bills would go 3 and out time and time again. Regarding the offensive strategy, Ken Dorsey was his first year as offensive coordinator for the Bills. It seems like Josh Allen likes him more as the offensive coordinators in years prior, so that's good. The Bills did have a solid offense last season, but I think Ken Dorsey needs to stop and prevent Josh Allen from playing hero ball 3 plays in a row. And I feel like I just can't trust the offensive coordinator that threw a tantrum and rage monstered his desk and iPad when they lost 1 game. But we have yet to see what more Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen can do in the upcoming years. The next team I would take off this list, narrowing it to the top 4, I would take off the Cincinnati Bengals. I would mainly take the Bengals off because of their offensive line weaknesses. Volson and Collins were definitely weak and not the best last year. They're still on the team this upcoming season, and I don't really see too many adjustments making this Bengals offensive line just so much better. Additionally, to me, there seems to be a problem with the Bengals running back room. It's not the best. The run game is average, I would say. Joe Mixon is pretty good, but he seems to be the only viable running back in Cincinnati, and how many years does he have left? If Joe Mixon can't stay out of trouble and ends up not in the Bengals this upcoming season, the Bengals running back room is Samaje Perine and Trevon Williams, which isn't the worst, but there's definitely a lot better running back groups out there. The Bengals wide receiver group, though, is one of the best out there with Boyd, Higgins, and Chase. You don't have a lot of groups like that where there's 3 solid wide receivers to that level of talent. But if Joe Burrow doesn't have time to throw the ball and can't get protection, it doesn't matter how good those wide receivers are if Joe Mixon's on his ass. So these are what I believe to be the top 4 offenses going into the 2023 season. And I think anyone could make an argument for any of these teams to be the best offense going into the 2023 season. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to break down and compare each of these teams' offenses and tell you which one I believe to be the best offense and why. Starting out with the second most important part of an offense, maybe the most important part, the offensive line. Starting out with the Chiefs' offensive line. Their offensive line was pretty solid last season, and it looks to be pretty solid once again, but there are a few questions. The Chiefs had a few departures this offseason and a few additions. Orlando Brown Jr. and Andrew Wiley left with the additions of Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith. Taylor will start at right tackle, but it's uncertain if Donovan Smith will 100% start at left tackle, and that seems to be the questionable part of the Chiefs' offensive line, as Smith's performance last year definitely declined, and last season he ranked second among all offensive tackles and penalties. Rookie Morris, who the Chiefs just drafted in the 3rd round, might be the potential starter in left tackle over Smith. Next up, the Lions, and I don't see many holes in this offensive line. The Lions have been building up this offensive line for years, and they have used a ton of capital on it. Taylor Decker, 1st round pick back in 2016, is now an established veteran and great lineman. However, the only problem is with injuries that could affect Decker's playtime. If he stays healthy, that's great, but if he's injured, it could be a problem for the Lions line. However, Lions' recent pick, left tackle Colby Sorsdale, has been talked about being a potential gem or steal from this past draft. So if that's true and Sorsdale comes out and plays amazing, it could end up improving the Lions' offensive line, and even if Decker isn't injured, the Lions still have that depth there. Additionally, Frank Ragnow, 2018 1st round pick, has been amazing, and the most recent star 1st round pick in the 2021 draft, Penei Sewell, right tackle, has just been unbelievable. And Jonah Jackson, since he was drafted in 2020, shows a ton of promise and has proved to be a solid left guard. And Vaitai is questionable coming into 2023. He did miss the whole 2022 season due to injury, but even if he goes down again or he's not performing, the Lions have a good amount of depth to replace him, as it didn't really seem to be a problem last season. Next up, the Eagles. The Eagles probably have the best offensive line right now in the NFL. Lane Johnson and Jason Kelce are probably the best at their position. Jordan Mailata has proved to be a top 10 tackle in the NFL. Landon Dickerson is extremely solid. And Cam Jurgens, soon to be rookie, recent draft pick from the Eagles, hopefully will be great. And even if he's not, or the Eagles offensive line suffers some sort of injuries, they have great depth, especially with Jack DeScroll. And lastly, the San Francisco 49ers. Going into last season, Banks, Brendale, and Burford were all extremely young, and somehow the 49ers made it work and had one of the strongest offensive lines in the NFL. Colton McKivitz, right tackle, will be the new starter on this offensive line. The offensive line, though, it seems to be a little young, but it's extremely solid, especially when you have the best left tackle, probably the best tackle in all of the NFL, in Trent Williams. When looking over all 4 of these offensive lines, if I were to rank them, I would definitely rank Philadelphia at number 1. After watching them all last season through the playoffs and the Super Bowl, their offensive line was just unbeatable and definitely the best in the NFL last season, and I think they'll definitely be the best this upcoming season. The second best offensive line, I think I would go with Detroit. I think Detroit's offensive line sticks out the most out of Kansas City, the 49ers, and Detroit. I promise it's not biased. Maybe it's a little bit because I am a Lions fan. But with the 49ers, I know they have Trent Williams, but I feel like their core is just a little bit too young. And with Kansas City, that questionable left tackle position, I feel like the Lions have a more complete offensive line than the 49ers in Kansas City. Not to say that they don't have good offensive lines, though, because the 49ers, KC, all these 4 teams have the best offensive lines right now in football. Moving on to wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, starting again with the Chiefs. The wide receiver room is looking a little bit different than last year. No Juju Smith-Schuster. Wide receiver 1 is Marquez Valdes-Scantling again, Kadarius Toney, and Sky Moore. Now, people were worried when the Chiefs traded away Tyreek Hill. People were like, Patrick Mahomes is going to be nothing without him, and he's going to struggle. And he went on to win the Super Bowl. Valdes-Scantling had some pretty good production last year, but Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore are young and didn't really see a ton of field time last year. But I think it's going to be the same as last year for the Chiefs, in that it doesn't matter who the wide receivers are, because Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball and he still has Travis Kelce, and that's all that really matters. And with the running backs is Isaiah Pacheco, and running back 2, Jerick McKinnon. We saw the fall off of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You know, he was picked high in the draft, came in rookie year, not the best, and this kind of fell off. And Isaiah Pacheco, drafted in the late 2022 draft, came out of nowhere and is now the running back 1 and is extremely solid. Let's move on to the Detroit Lions. Wide receiver 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Wide receiver 2, Jameson Williams. And wide receiver 3, Marvin Jones Jr. Now, we know Jameson Williams is suspended for the first 6 games of the season, but I don't think it's really going to matter because the Lions have extreme depth with the wide receiver position. They still have Josh Reynolds, Calif Raymond, Tom Kennedy. It's stacked. They have 6 viable wide receivers, and they only need 3. And for Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's young. He's going into his 3rd year in the NFL, and he's currently averaging a 74% catch rate, which is unbelievable. He's coming off an 1,100-yard season. I'm excited for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And for the running back room, it was running back 1, DeAndre Swift, running back 2, Jamal Williams, and now it's Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, and with tight end Brock Wright. But the Lions also drafted Sam Laporta in the 1st round. We know that Brock Wright was young and very viable last year, but Sam Laporta seems to be a very exciting prospect for the Lions coming into his rookie season. And a lot of Lions fans are saying he's going to break out and have an unbelievable rookie season. We have yet to see, though, if that will happen or not. It may just be Lions fans getting too excited, but I'm excited as well. The Eagles, wide receiver 1, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Quez Watkins, all extremely solid wide receivers. We saw them all on display in the Super Bowl last year, especially A.J. Brown. You toss it up and that man will bring it down. Running back 1, DeAndre Swift, coming from the Lions, and running back 2, Rashad Penny, coming from Seattle, and tight end Dallas Goedert. The Eagles have a very nice wide receiver room, stacked across the board, a solid tight end. The problem, though, is the running back room. DeAndre Swift, coming from the Lions, has been in the league for 3 years and is known to be injury prone. A lot of Lions fans would argue about this, if he is or isn't. I would say DeAndre Swift is definitely injury prone. He's been in the league for 3 years and has yet to play a full season staying healthy. Additionally, he's had reoccurring shoulder issues and reoccurring ankle injuries. He did have a concussion to set him out a few games. I feel like that doesn't really count, but the reoccurring injuries is definitely a problem. I do love, though, DeAndre Swift, and if he can stay healthy, he is an animal out there. I mean, he can make guys miss in the open. That's what he's set to do. Give it out to him to the left, give it out to him to the right, dump it off to him on a screen or just a few yards up the field. He'll make 4 guys miss and pick up 20 yards. And then Penny, also coming off a year where he's been dealing with his injuries. He's entering his 6th year in the league, but last season he only played 5 games and really only has 1 solid season to his name, 2021, where he rushed over 700 yards. But I don't really think that Philadelphia not having the best running backs is really a problem, because Jalen Hurts has his scrambling ability. He's great out in the open, picking up first downs. Defenders not only have to watch for the run, but they're trying to keep account for Jalen Hurts, which you can do a whole lot with offensive scheming for that. And of course, Philadelphia has an amazing offensive line, so I'm not really worried about Philly's run game. And lastly, the 49ers, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings, Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, and George Kittle. Looking over these 4 teams with the tight end positions, I would definitely say Travis Kelce is definitely the best. Goedert's extremely solid though too, and George Kittle, of course, is a stud. If the Lions have Sam Laporta panning out to be an amazing tight end, all these teams are set solid with their tight ends, obviously more than others, with Travis Kelce and Kittle just being the best tight ends we've seen in a while. I would say that all these teams except the Kansas City Chiefs have solid wide receiver rooms. The Lions definitely have the most depth, but A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Quez Watkins, the 49ers, all of these have super solid wide receiver rooms except the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a little iffy, but Patrick Mahomes did it last year, and I'm sure he'll make it work again because it's just Patrick Mahomes. And for the running back room, I would definitely say the Eagles have the weakest. It's close between the Eagles and Chiefs. I would definitely say that the 49ers are on top with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell. That's definitely the best running back room out of these 4. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, I'd want to say, is a close second between the Eagles and Lions. We don't really know how well Jahmyr Gibbs will pan out. David Montgomery was a stud last year in Chicago with a terrible offensive line bouncing off defenders. Jahmyr Gibbs seems really explosive, so I'd like to put them over DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, because I think a lot can agree that Jahmyr Gibbs was an upgrade from DeAndre Swift. It's tough to say, but I do think it's true. But that's not to count out Isaiah Pacheco. He's a stud. He just won a Super Bowl in his rookie season. I just think if you look at running back 1 and running back 2 combined, I think Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are a better duo than Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon. And lastly, the quarterback position and offensive mind. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Jared Goff, Ben Johnson, Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni, Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, maybe Trey Lance instead of Brock Purdy. Kyle Shanahan has been killing it with the 49ers over the past few years. Ben Johnson, we saw the immersion of him last year. Hopefully he can continue doing a great job. Andy Reid, just one of the best offensive minds in NFL history. Nick Sirianni has been great with the Eagles. Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes are definitely the top 2 QBs here. I'd probably rank them Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, just because Brock Purdy's younger. Not saying that he doesn't have more potential, though, than Jared Goff. Overall, after we've looked at these 4 teams, I'm going to rank them here. And in 4th place, I'm going to rank the 49ers. Now, it's a tough one, though, because the 49ers last season, 3 different quarterbacks came into play and all performed at a top high level, and they're still winning even with Brock Purdy coming in barely playing in the NFL. But I think the Lions have a more complete offensive line with more depth and a more complete wide receiver room with more depth. So that's why I put the Lions at 3rd. And for 2nd, I'm going with the Chiefs just because Patrick Mahomes can get it done with anyone. It doesn't matter who he's throwing the ball to, as long as he still has Travis Kelce. The Chiefs are going to win, and he proved that to us last year. And at number 1, I have the Eagles. Jalen Hurts is emerging as one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in a while. He can run, he can throw, he can make guys miss. The Eagles have a phenomenal offensive line, phenomenal wide receiver room, phenomenal tight end, pretty solid running backs, but with Jalen Hurts' legs, it doesn't matter. We saw the Eagles offense in the Super Bowl. I think the Eagles definitely had the more dominant offense, and they probably should have won the Super Bowl. But it's unlucky. That's the difference about Patrick Mahomes to other quarterbacks. I feel like no matter who Patrick Mahomes is playing with, no matter who his wide receivers are, no matter what his offensive line is, as long as they're good enough, Patrick Mahomes last second can find a way to win, which that's why Patrick Mahomes is one of the best quarterbacks of all time already. But this year might be different. I'm just basing this off what we've seen already. I'd love to rank the Lions higher, but you really can't because we haven't seen them play enough, especially not in the postseason. But I think the Lions have a great shot at being the 2nd best offense in the NFL, and Kansas City dropping. If Patrick Mahomes can't get it done with his wide receivers and can't get it done with his offensive line that has a few holes, there's some questions up in the air on how these teams will perform up this upcoming season, so we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments. I always love hearing your opinions, and that is going to be the end of this video. If you enjoy my content, I would really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot, and once again, as always, thanks for watching.